All right, let's go to our big guest of the week. Cole Cubelic joining us here from the SEC Network and, of course, ESPN. You can catch him on Mac and Cube there on WJOX 94.5. Cole, good morning, man. How are you?
Good morning, David. Good to be with you. How are you?
Good, man. So I'm going to start things off with what's going on there in Baton Rouge, LSU. How have they gotten it done, especially when it felt like it started off a little rocky with Brian Kelly with the accent and then the opening week loss. But since then, outside of Tennessee, they've been pretty darn good, man.
Well, I think you go back to before Brian Kelly took over and then after he took over and just kind of what was in place. I said in the preseason that I thought after Alabama and Georgia, they had the next most talented roster in the SEC. And there's some folks that didn't like that, Billy Lucci being one. But, I think when you look at the amount of guys that are going to play on Sunday, they've got guys who can make plays. And then you got Mason Taylor come in at tight end. You got Harold Perkins come in at linebacker. They've gotten some help from a couple of youngsters that they've added to that roster. And it's one of those situations where I don't know if they've just gotten better and better, but I think that they have just figured things out. It's almost like moving the chess pieces around. Like they were trying to put a puzzle together with the wrong pieces, and now they have the right pieces, and they're able to go out and find ways to be successful. So it's been a magnificent coaching job. It's been a good job of getting those guys to buy in, understand the system, and they've altered it. I think they went through the first few games and had a quarterback that didn't really seem comfortable getting to either his third or fourth progression. Now they understand, hey, let's just kind of go quick here and give him a 1-2 and then go. If you don't like what you see after your first or second read, take off. And giving him more half-field reads, they spread the field a little bit more to open up more rush lanes for quarterback runs, be it leaving the pocket or by design. And the offensive line, I think they played 4 different offensive line combinations the first 5 or 6 games. They finally have some consistency there, and that's helping out. So utilize where you have talent. That's at wide receiver. That's at running back. That's at quarterback. And they've made those guys' ability to make plays much easier and giving them a better percentage of going out and being successful. Defensively, just give Matt House a lot of credit, man. Like, he was great when he was at Kentucky and nobody talked about him. He's great right now there at LSU. He knows how to devise a plan, and he's found a couple of playmakers that he can lean on. The interior of their defensive line has probably been the highlight of that team for me. They have exceeded every expectation I had for them. We knew they had guys off the edge, and now they've got great linebacker play with Perkins coming in, and the middle of that defensive line is playing fantastic football.
What about Bama? What's next for them? How different are they going to look? Is O'Brien going to be back? Is Golden going to be back? How do you feel that – because I can't imagine Nick Saban doesn't just go right back to the lab and change things up.
I think you'll probably see a pretty big shift in his coaching staff. I think from a philosophical standpoint, Nick Saban has a lot of people that think in a very similar fashion to him right now. And in the past, he's had guys that would challenge him and guys who would try things in a different way. He doesn't really have that right now. So I would not be surprised to see some guys that have ties to his early time in Alabama make a return to Tuscaloosa. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a pretty big shift. Now, is he ready for one more big reset? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not somebody who's going to get on here and tell you that, I think this is close to the end, or he's running out of juice, or he's tired. I'm not going to buy into any of that. But I do wonder, is he ready for one more big reset with that staff? And maybe that includes some philosophical changes with the offense or the defense or different thinkers or different guys he hadn't been around before. I don't know, but he's going to tinker with it one way or the other. I think the big question is just how big of a change are we looking at as far as Nick Saban's staff is concerned?
Cole, what about A&M and Auburn this weekend? I wanted it to be a big deal. It's not a big deal. Both teams want to get to bowl eligible, obviously, but this what a collapse for A&M, and honestly, a reset for Auburn's coming again.
I think it can be a big deal, though, for different reasons. Like, we had Billy on my show today, and he's like, what's really on the line here? And I think when you look at it from an A&M perspective, it's hard to see it as a big deal as far as, okay, what comes of this if A&M wins this game? I would flip it around. It can be a big deal if you lose this game because, you're on the brink of a and maybe a 1-win season in conference play. That can't happen. I mean, how many big-time coaches, how many successful coaches do we know that have that kind of a season on their resume? And I'm not alluding to A&M getting rid of Jimbo Fisher or anything like that, but just we don't see national championship caliber quarterbacks have a 3 or 4 win season on their resume, especially and then keep going. It just doesn't happen. So I do think that it could be a massive game on the side of if A&M were to drop it, kind of where that potentially puts them with LSU still in front of them. I'm not going to go into UMass and think that that's going to be anything other than a win for A&M. And then for Auburn, I think you gain some real energy. And I don't know if it pushes Carnell to being a realistic candidate of being the head coach, but I think it makes the next coach say, we got to have him on our staff, and he's got to be a guy that's affiliated with this program. And then it gives you a chance to go beat Western Kentucky. And like you just mentioned, an Alabama team that they might not know what they're playing for. And there might not be a ton of motivation on that side of the ball. And they go to Tuscaloosa to play that football team there, completely rejuvenated and having some new life. So there is some meaning. It's definitely a tough sell saying you got two teams that have lost 5 straight games coming to face each other. I don't think I've ever seen it. I don't think I've ever seen 2 teams from a Power 5 conference playing one another that have both lost 5 consecutive games. But I think there's a lot on the line in different areas in different ways for both of these teams.
How shocking for you has the A&M offensive line been? I know there's been some injuries to Bryce and different guys there, but that was supposed to be somewhat of a strength, and it certainly hasn't been.
I thought it had a chance to be the best group in the league. And it has been beyond surprising to me, mainly the right side, because Layden Robinson was one of the better guards in the SEC last year. And when we saw him fill in a couple of years ago, he was that dude. And, Reuben Fatherly, I thought he had a chance to be the best tackle in the SEC this year, just based on potential and some of the things that I saw from him, his measurables, his size. And it almost feels like that side's just gone backwards. And I don't know how that happens, especially 2 guys with that much ability and that much talent. You can excuse some of the other, I guess, drawbacks or deficiencies because of injury and moving guys around. That's understandable. They don't have a lot of help from a tight end this year. They've had that in the past. That's not been a real area attached to the line of scrimmage. It's been a strength or utilized a whole lot. So some of that can be understandable, but the injury part, playing younger guys and having to move guys, I don't look at that ever and point a finger and say, goodness gracious, this is terrible. But when I see 2 guys that have played a lot of SEC football and have played well, and they're not consistently playing well the next year, that's where I kind of scratch my head and just have to wonder what went wrong. How is this happening?
Last thing for you, let's talk Arkansas. They were the media darlings at the SEC Media Days. They've had a rough year. What has happened there, and what's the perception around the league about Arkansas and Sam Pittman now?
I don't think the perception of Sam Pittman is going to change because he is still overachieved. Do not forget where that program was when he took over, and that was winless in the SEC for more than 2 seasons and just completely at the bottom of the barrel of the SEC, including Vanderbilt. So I think he still has things heading in the right direction. He's doing well in recruiting. This last game was this was a weird one. Liberty had 14 tackles for loss in that game. And that's a good Arkansas offensive line. They played pretty good football the entire season. To go out and lay up that kind of a matchup is just it's not acceptable. And the weird part about it is I think if I'd have told you that Hugh Freeze and Liberty beat Arkansas, you'd have thought that the quarterback threw for 480 yards and 5 touchdowns, and they were going fast, and they had 611 total yards. That wasn't it. Arkansas outgained Liberty by a pretty decent amount. They just dominated defensively, and I kind of questioned the plan from Kendall Briles. Liberty runs a defense that moves around a lot. It's kind of like an old Joe Lee Dunn style defense. Guys are standing up, walking all over the place. You get pressure from depth. You get different guys that are overloading one side. So it can be confusing and it can be difficult to manage. But for me, if you're the bigger, badder guy in the room, the way you manage that is just punch them right in the face. I mean, you go right at them. It's like you see some of these UFC fights where the guys are like doing these air kicks on air and like spinning around and everything. And then they come up to fight and somebody just pops them right in the nose. Like, to me, that's how Arkansas should have attacked that game. And they didn't attack it that way. It was a very odd plan, a lot of time in the pocket, a lot of time on the perimeter. And that allowed Liberty to use those things that they do to be successful. So you're not going to be mad about the Alabama loss. The A&M loss, obviously, we know there was one massive play that swung that game. It's a rivalry game. You understand it. The Mississippi State game was kind of ugly. And then that Liberty game was kind of ugly. You go to BYU and get a win. That was a BYU team I thought was going to be really good this year. They haven't turned out to be great, but they've done some good things. It's just consistency has not been their friend. I think that shows a lack of depth. And I think it shows that when they lose a guy or two in certain spots, it's going to hurt them more than it hurts a lot of other teams.
Cole, we appreciate it, man. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.
Hey, I appreciate you